Where mid-March to the second last week of March, you saw maybe 7 out of 10 condominiums listed for bidding wars, especially downtown. Today's video, another edition of where I go through the TREB resale report for the Toronto real estate and GTA real estate market and go through all the important things you need to know in terms of sales figures, trends, and other data that is important. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and RE/MAX Realtron Realty Inc. As always, back with another video here for you guys today. You can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. If you have any need with Toronto real estate matters or if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me with those questions or those needs. Furthermore, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is much appreciated. Now, once again, today, another edition of my monthly series where I go through the TREB resale report, the Toronto Real Estate Board resale report, the market at large with regards to the GTA homes, Toronto condos, everything in between, and go through some sales data, some figures, give you the larger context for these numbers and trends that you should know. As always, I look at the entire report and take detailed notes when it comes out, but I can't cover the entire thing in a video. It would be far too long. However, today's video is going to be a little longer than usual, and going forward, I'm going to try my best to cover as much from the report in these videos, so you can expect a longer video going forward. If that is in any way annoying, you can skip to whatever parts you want in the video chapters with the timestamps at the bottom of the screen, in the description box, or in the comments. So again, before we get into it, please subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support is much appreciated, and you can find my contact info in the description box. But enough of that, let's get to the report. Let's start with the most general figures and general trends. In March 2021, with regards to the Toronto GTA real estate market and overall all the TREB areas, there was a 97% increase in the total number of transactions year over year. So comparing this to March 2020, where in this year we saw 15,000 real estate transactions in the month of March 2021 compared to the 7,000 transactions we saw in March 2020. Now, this is a 97% increase, as I said, and it's truly, it's alarming when you look at it, but there's some things that you should keep in mind that will put this number in better perspective for you. Most importantly, the fact that when we looked at March, the reason the amount of transactions was so low was due to the pandemic. So the numbers of March of last year, 2020, can be very much so misleading because the low amount of transactions compared to this year is mainly due to the fact that pandemic put a pause and reduced the number of transactions by a considerable amount. The remainder of explanation is obviously it's also a hot market as well. So it's due to both factors. Number one, last year we were dealing with a lower than normal amount of transactions due to the initial hit of the pandemic. And number two, this year, so far, it's a very hot market. So these two in conjunction with another should really provide you further context as to why it's a 97% increase we're looking at. Now let's look at average selling price. Now this metric, unlike the previous one I discussed, when we compare it to March of 2020, this metric wasn't really affected all that much by the start of the pandemic. The average selling price of March 2020 was $902,000, whereas this year in March 2021, we're looking at a 21% increase at the average selling price of $1,097,000. Part of the reason we're seeing such a high average selling price across all types in all areas is because condos are no longer lagging and bringing the average down, because as we'll get to later in the video, the condo market has made a return. Obviously, that's a general statement, and I will cover later in the video in detail why that is the case for most areas. However, there's some complexities that I will cover as well. Another metric that was somewhat impacted by the world event, which was total number of listings, where last year in March 2020, we saw a total number of new listings of 14,000, and this year we saw March 2021 year over year an increase of 57% in the figure of 22,000 this month. Once again, I just want to repeat that, the first metric we talked about, which was total number of transactions, and this one, you can see in common sense ways why a worldwide event as we experienced last year would affect these figures. people were less open to listing their property onto the market, and the number of transactions dipped as well. In contrast, there was no effect on the average selling price. And you can use common sense to dictate why. Things such as market value is way more immaterial in nature and abstract than literal and material metrics such as listing a house on for sale and a total number of actual transactions. All right, now let's get to more specific numbers, shall we, for more specific areas. And then we'll end with the condo numbers and more trends in the condo sector. Starting with detached properties. The average cost of a detached property in all TREB areas, so you can think of TREB areas, as I always say, the city of Toronto plus the GTA plus surrounding areas, but you could pretty much think of it as just the entirety of GTA with certain outskirts. So the average selling price of a detached property this year was 1.402 million, so 1.4 million. Now let's compare this figure to the preceding month. Now we're no longer doing a year over year, we're doing period over period. So the preceding month, the average selling price of a detached property in the same areas, which is basically the entirety of the GTA, is 1.371, so 1.3 million. We're looking at an increase of $30,000 on average. And I think the average would have been much higher. The average amount of increase would have been much higher if we continue down the path that we started in March 2021, because in the beginning of March 2021 and end of February of 2021, the market for detached properties and freehold properties at large was very much so hot. Now it's still hot. You do see a lot of multiple offers and a lot of bidding wars, but due to a lot of measures from the banks and interest rates and a lot of buyer fatigue, we have seen it cool down just a bit. But this cooling down towards the latter days or latter weeks of March, don't get me wrong, this cooling down is by no means meaning there's a moderate market right now. It's still a very seller-friendly market, and we do still see a lot of bidding wars and multiple offer scenarios. However, it's by no means as hot as it was in the beginning of March and end of February. Now let us look at the city of Toronto in terms of detached properties. The average selling price of a detached property in February 2021, and in the following month, which is this month, March 2021, average selling price is 1.75. So we went from 1.68 to 1.75, increase of $70,000. And not only did we see an increase in price as represented just now, but we also saw an increase in number of transactions. And I think this is the fact that actually is more alarming, is an increase in number of transactions, which this month we have 1,400 transactions. So the average selling price of 1.7 at 1,400 transactions, whereas the preceding month we had only 900 transactions. And these number of transactions, once again, is for the city of Toronto, not Toronto Central, not just Toronto West, but city of Toronto at large, from all the way from Etobicoke to Scarborough. And once again, I want to repeat that most of this heavy lifting of the increase in price, increase in number of transactions, in my frank opinion, has occurred in the first half of March. And naturally, this is reflected in Toronto. And then let's go to York region, where we continue to look at detached numbers in York region, where the average selling price of a detached property in York region last month, the preceding period, was 1.511. And then when we compare it to this month, the current period we're discussing in terms of Toronto real estate market and GTA real estate market, the average selling price of a detached property in March 2021 was 1.544. I will break down the specific areas of York region in terms of prices in future videos. So when I say specific areas, I mean more specific, such as Richmond Hill versus King versus Vaughan, and even more specific than that, the specific communities, and do the same for Toronto, so Toronto Central, Toronto West, and the specific communities for those as well in future videos. As you can see so far, this video has been far too long and we haven't even got to condos yet. And speaking of condos, let's get into the condo market. Now, when discussing the condo numbers for the Toronto real estate market and GTA real estate market, and specifically the downtown condo market, we're going to start at a general level and then eventually move on towards more of a specific look at specific areas and trends. So at a large general level, city of Toronto, so all Toronto condos, the average selling price of a Toronto condo in March 2021 is $707,000. And once again, we're comparing these not year over year to the preceding month, so we're comparing to February. And the average selling price of a condo in the city of Toronto in February of 2021, the preceding period, was $676,000. So we see an increase, and this is where we see the signs of a condo market truly coming back and getting hotter, as I predicted a month ago, where I was looking at the numbers at that point in time. So period over period, we see an increase in the average selling price of a condo. And part of the explanation as to why this increase is happening now is because, and I will keep touching on these points because these also apply to the downtown areas that I will discuss. is because a lot of buyers shifted from the freehold market to the condominium market. As I told you previously, there was a lot of buyer fatigue of people being priced out of the freehold market for detached, semi-detached, even townhomes. As a result, they kind of shifted towards the condo market. And this was also in conjunction with a lot of good news in terms of things opening up again and Canada hoping to meet its migration targets, and then a set of investors jumping in to buy low. And believe it or not, there was a good 2-week span where, as soon as the bidding wars and multiple offers started kind of dissipating from the freehold market, don't get me wrong, once again, yes, out of every 10 properties, 6 of them were still listed for bidding wars, but that's comparing to the preceding weeks where 11 out of 10 properties were listed for bidding wars. So a lot of that, when it dissipated, it kind of got shifted into the condo market, where mid-March to the second last week of March, you saw maybe 7 out of 10 condominiums listed for bidding wars, especially downtown. But as I will get to the end of this video, we are seeing kind of a downturn in condo prices on a very minuscule scale within the span of a week. But before we get to that, let's get to the condo numbers for the entirety of March 2021 in terms of downtown Toronto condo market. The average cost of a condo in downtown Toronto was $778,000. A $50,000 increase in period over period, so comparing to the preceding period of February 2021, where the average selling price of a condo was $727,000. And that by itself was already an increase over January, right? So we've been trending towards this direction. But when we look at it year over year, so comparing March 2021 at the price we have it now as the average selling price, comparing it to the March of 2020, it is still less than it was in March 2020. Where in downtown Toronto, the average selling price of a condominium in March 2020 year over year was $850,000, in the 850s, if memory serves me correct. So March 2021, in terms of the downtown Toronto condo market, it's much higher than February 2021, but it's still less in average price than March 2020 in terms of downtown condos, but it's only less than the average selling price. When we look at the number of transactions, the number of transactions have skyrocketed. This month, we have a number of transactions around 750, where March 2020, we had transactions around 350. So we see an increase in the number of transactions by a factor of 400. So as I said, the condo market has gotten hotter. It's been getting hot. It has been on a return, and it is back. It's no longer a buyer's market. It's no longer even a moderate market anymore. It is a slightly seller's market. But as I mentioned previously, if you have the energy and wherewithal to actually listen to me rant all this video, I said the prices have come down in the last 2 weeks. And here I'm going to break down the last 2 weeks in terms of the trends in terms of downtown condominiums. And as you can see from these charts on the screen, I took an accounting of March 22nd to March 28th in terms of average selling prices and average asking prices for all property types for downtown condominiums. So when I'm talking about types in terms of the downtown Toronto condo market, I mean 1 bed, 1 wash, 1+1 and 1 wash, 2 wash, 2 bed. So breaking it down based on the number of bedrooms and washrooms and +1s, we see that when we look at March 22nd to March 28th and compare those figures to March 29th to April 4th, which I'm cheating a bit, it's no longer just about March, I'm bringing in the April numbers. But having said that, in the last 2 weeks before recording this video, which is at the time of recording, this is April 5th, we see that prices have come down across all types. So once again, 1+1s are now a bit cheaper and the prices have come down compared to the preceding week. 2 bed and 2 washes, prices have come down compared to the preceding week. Given the very hot market for downtown Toronto condos in the entirety of March, is it the case that in the last week and a half in March and a couple of days into April, the prices have been coming down? Well, same thing. It was way too many bidding wars, way too many multiple offer situations, and buyers started getting priced out of downtown Toronto condos. Fatigue started to grow in the downtown Toronto condo market, and very, very small marginal correction occurred. Now, I'm actually going to be doing this on a weekly basis for downtown, and I do it for downtown, but I also do it for Richmond Hill, for Midtown, for North York. I do it for all areas, go through the numbers and update myself weekly on the prices and trends. And then what I predict is in the coming weeks, we're going to see a sustain at this level. I don't think it's going to drop a bit more, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to jump back up. But we will see what the numbers have in store for us. Anyways, That is probably one of my longest videos ever. Thank you for watching the entire thing and sitting through it. If you actually did, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. I appreciate your support as always in that regard. And you can find my contact info in the description box. Thank you very much.